we're going to be covering how you can select the spreadsheet data using Google Apps Script, and then how you can use the data where you iterate through all of the data and take the column information and send out emails to the users that are listed within the spreadsheet. HTML structured emails that are going to be sent to the inboxes of the users from the spreadsheet, and you can create the structure of the HTML directly within Google Apps Script. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Go over to your Google Drive, select the spreadsheet with the data, and open up the spreadsheet. I've added another column where I've got an email address so that we can prepare to send emails to those users, and that's going to be directly from the spreadsheet. Within the extensions, select Apps Script to open up the script editor for the spreadsheet. You can give the Apps Script a name by clicking up at the top where you've got the project title and then entering in a name, and I'm going to call it Sheet Data Test. So renaming the project, and once you click enter, the project will be renamed to the new name for the project. The name that you have for the app script is going to be different than what you have for the sheet, and this name is how you're going to be referencing your app script project, either within the script list or within the permissions that you've provided to the various applications that are running. You can see the full app script list of projects by going over to script.google.com. If we select the last modified and open up the sheet data test, this is going to be referencing that app script that's going to be bound to the spreadsheet using the name sheet data test. If we go back, we can also see the bound scripts and how they're represented within the projects, where they've got the icon for the app script just above the main icon for the application. And the standalone scripts are going to be represented differently, where they're just going to be using the app script icon in order to represent the script. So you can see the difference of the scripts, and this is where you'd be using the name of those scripts. The bound scripts aren't going to show up within your Google Drive. Only the container file is going to be showing within the Google Drive, just as we see here, where we've got the container file is a spreadsheet called tester1. That's what's going to show up within the drive, not the Google Apps Script file. Bound scripts can be added into sheets, docs, slides, and forms, and we're going to be covering that in the upcoming lessons. In order to reopen the script, you can go to either the main containing file, or you can go to the scripts.google.com/home and select the project that you want to work with. So go back into your app script editor for the bound script. And because we created macros, there's going to be a macros.js file. If we didn't have any macros within the spreadsheet, it would default to a default file for the Google script. So if we were to create a brand new spreadsheet, and I'm going to just make a copy of our existing one, call it tester2, and now it's duplicating the spreadsheet. And if we go into extensions apps script, it will make a duplicate of the bound apps script with the same name that we used within the other script. So it's created a separate Google Apps Script when we duplicated the spreadsheet that it was bound to. And if you do duplicate your spreadsheets, best practice is to rename your apps script as well. If you create a brand new spreadsheet, under the extensions apps script, open up the script editor, and this script now is not going to have any macros attached to it. It's going to create a default file called code.js, and this is where you can start writing your app script code into. Go ahead and close those. And let's go back to our original file where it had created the macros.js file. We're going to create a separate file, a Google script file, that we can work with within this lesson. And you can create multiple JS files within any Google Apps Script project, and they're all going to be able to be accessed by running the various functions of those files. So let's create and add a new file. From the plus, select script, and you also have an option for HTML, which we are going to look at later on. So select script, and I'm going to just call it code. By default, it's going to add the GS extension and create a default function that's going to be blank and called my function. So this is the default if there is no code within the app script that it's going to create and open up as. Best practice is to give the function a meaningful name. So I'm going to call this sheet data test. And because this is a bound script, we can select the active spreadsheet, and we'll do that within an object using the spreadsheet app class, get the active spreadsheet object. And in order to select the sheet, we can create a separate object for the sheet using the spreadsheet object that we just constructed using the variable SS. We can then get the active sheet, which will select the sheet that is currently active. If you have multiple sheets within your spreadsheet, then this will select whatever one is currently active. Within the app script as well, we have a way to log out content, which can be used for debugging of your application. And that's using the logger function with a method called log contained within it. So anything that you output, and it's going to be expecting a value within the parentheses, it will output into the log. In order to run the application, under the Run menu, you can select the function from the drop-down list. Currently, we only just have the one function, the sheet data test. So selecting that as the one that we want to run, and then select Run in order to execute the code within the function. Because we were using the log, we got info coming from the log, and that's going to be the output data that we've passed in to the log as the parameter within the log argument. So now that we've selected the sheet, we can log the sheet out as well. And when we run it, we get returned back that we've got a sheet object. If we output our spreadsheet, which is contained within the SS, we're going to get returned back that we've got a spreadsheet object. So the spreadsheet object is the main container. The sheet is going to be the one that we're active on. Let's go ahead and duplicate this, and we'll create a few other sheets. So we've got 3 sheets there. And select the third one, copy of copy sheet 1 as the current active one that we have within the spreadsheet. And let's select that sheet name. So using the sheet object, once we press the dot, it's going to provide us a drop-down of some of the methods that are available on the sheet object. And as you can tell, there's quite a lot of them here. We're going to look at the get sheet name, which should return back the current active sheet name that's open within the spreadsheet object. Let's run that, and we get the name. Let's select sheet 1. We'll close and execute the code again, and now we get returned back sheet 1. So what this is doing is this is getting the sheet name. So we want to get all of the contents of the spreadsheet, and we can do that by selecting a range that we want to use for the data. So selecting within the sheet object, just where we saw that we can get the sheet name, we also have a lot of additional options that we can get. Next is the get data range. And within the log, let's return back the range, and we'll see what we have for the data range. So we run it, and now we've got a range object. And within the range object, we can return back some information. So that's going to have its own set of methods that can be used. And we've got all of this information that we can retrieve back from the sheet. And the one that we want to use is the get values. So these are methods. So in order to invoke the methods, you do need to have the rounded brackets. Let's run the code one more time. And now we see what's getting returned back are all of the values within the spreadsheet. Starting with the first row of data, the second row of data, and these are all nested within a main array. So they're arrays that are nested within a main array. We've got the data. We can then loop through the data and make use of it within our code. To iterate through the data, you can use a for loop where you're looping through while I is less than the data length, as this is going to be an array, so it's going to have a length value. And we can then log out each one of the arrays that's nested within it. So we've got the data, and we can use the I value as the index value to retrieve the row of content. So now as we run it, this main array that we got back originally from the values, now we can see each one of the rows of content. And if we want to as well, we could loop through each one of these arrays and then output the values for those. My preference is to use the for each method, and this will retrieve back the row of data with an easier to use format where we can select the row value. Both of them will work, but I usually find that doing it this way is a lot more effective and it's easier to read. So it's retrieving back all of the same information. And we also want to remove out the headings, and that's going to be contained within the first row of data. Going back over to the spreadsheet, the structure of the sheet is that the first row contains the headings, and then the following rows are where we've got the data. So let's remove out that first row from the data, where we can just set it as a variable called results. And this is going to be an array. And then instead of using all of the values, we can take from the results using the slice method, which will return back the data after the first row. And this is where all of the information that we want to use is going to be contained. So go ahead and run the application, and let's comment out some of the code that we don't need. And you can use the /* and then */ to break back into the code. Also going to comment out the other log information. Let's run the application. And then we can go through the data where we know that the first row is first name, next column is last name, ID, and then the fourth one is the one with the email. So let's retrieve back the value that's contained within row column number 4. And because this is similar as an array, so it's 0 based, we're retrieving back the contents with the index value of 3, which would be equal to the fourth column of data. So that retrieves back the email addresses. And if we want to take that email and send the user an email, let's first construct the message that we want to send them using the backticks and then the values that are contained within each one of the columns. So we've got the first name and the last name. And because it's going to be an HTML email, we can have a line break. And there's our welcome message. And then we'll add in the ID value for the user, so that each user will get a customized email with this ID value. So that's going to be the message that we're going to use. You can log out the message just to make sure that it's the message that you do want to send. Run the code, and these are the messages that are going to be sent to the users. And once you've finished with the debugging, you can comment out the bugging information, the logger information. Let's select the MailApp, which is how we can send emails from Google Apps Script. There's also the Gmail app, which we're going to look at later on, but the MailApp class is strictly for just sending emails, and it requires less permissions than having to interact with the Gmail app. So if you're just sending an email, use the MailApp method. And the method within the MailApp class is going to be send email. And we need some parameters. So we need to get the user that we want to send the email to. And the user is going to be contained within row with an index value of 3 that we've already output to the console. We're also going to need a subject for the email. And let's also customize this to include the user information for the subject. And now we've got all of the parameters in order to send the email. So the user, or actually this should be the email that we're sending it to. So the email address is the first parameter for the recipient, and it's expecting a string value for that. We also have the next parameter is going to be a subject. So this is also, the subject line is also going to be a string. And then for the body, we've got the message. So right now the body is going to be a string value. And I'll show you how to send an HTML one afterwards. So let's try running the code. We're going to have to accept permissions because right now our application is going to be sending out an email. So we have to approve those as permissions for the sheet data test application that we've just created in order to send the emails using our Google account. So go through, select the permissions, the account that we want to use. You're going to get this error message that says Google hasn't verified the app, and that's because we're still working on the app. So in order to get it verified, you have to send it to Google. There's an option to, if you hit back to safety, it's going to close the pop-up window. Select advanced in order to accept the permissions. It will tell us the account that we're adding this application to. And then at the bottom, it's going to tell us go to whatever the application name is. That will pop up the window, once again indicating the application name, the account that we're going to be using, the permissions that the sheet data test application is going to require and is asking for. And this is the new one here that we're sending email as you. You can always go to the myaccount.google.com/permissions. So this is where you can remove permissions to applications that have permissions that you've been given permissions to from your Google account. And once you've gone through all of this, select allow, and that's going to allow the application to run and to send the emails. So going into your inbox, you're going to get a security alert that we're granting permissions for the app, and then the code where it gets executed. So it actually sent 3 emails. Let's open up the emails, and it's got the customized email message as well as the ID and the email address that it went to. I'm using the same email address with the +1, +2, +3. If you add in a plus, that will still send it to that same core email address, but it'll treat it as a separate address. And that's a trick that you can use within Google in order to have different email addresses still using the same inbox for those emails to be retrieved. So check the message, make sure that it's correct. We got all 3 messages. Let's go back into the code, and this time we're going to send an HTML email instead of a text email. And we can do this with a small update to the code, and I'll move up the MailApp. So once again, it's using MailApp and send mail, and this time we're going to include the content as an object. So using the curly brackets and specifying within the object who we're sending it to. So that's going to be the email object that value. There's subject within the email, and they do have some examples of the object structure where it's subject and then HTML email. You can also add in images as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on where they're providing within the example. So this is all object based, and we already did create the subject value. And then HTML body is how you can send the HTML email. And we have the HTML body within the message value that we just created over here. Let's update this with a little bit more HTML and create them as paragraphs. So we have quite a bit of HTML going on there. And I'll also add in horizontal line. So now that we've got our HTML, let's run the code again and we'll see what we get in the email inbox. So clear all of these emails, run the code. We've already accepted permissions, so it's not going to ask us permissions again. Go to the inbox, and let's check out the emails that have been sent. So now they're structured as HTML. There's the first name, last name, the welcome to the site, and the ID. And they're all going to be structured the same way, using the data from the spreadsheet to send emails within the function. So go ahead and try it out for yourself. Create a spreadsheet, add in some values, and use those values to send emails using Google Apps Script. And you'll be ready to move on to the next lesson.